Charles, I wore my outrageous Under Armour jumper with the zippers on the sides. Thank you, Margaret and Howard, and thank you to Lane Community College for hosting this event. And thank you for the kind words, Charles. In the Moments Before Midnight book, I wrote the poem At the Zoo. With muddy thread, a kind God would stitch the plates of the planet back together, would anchor glaciers in their cold place, put a stitch in the hole of the ozone layer. Instead, greedy humans soil their orb and fail to patch what we ruin. The smartest and most clever of species maps out small repair plans and argues over money and labor, even elects a climate change denier. A kind God would teach her minions to share food and water, the nurturing paste of community and globe. Warriors of many nations would attack disease, the suffering of man and beast. Instead, the blue marble and her fractious zoo of Ripley's Believe It or Not inhabitants circles the cosmic clock like a dog chasing its tail. I know everybody's a little weary of politics, so am I. I have to monitor my news watching anymore. But my first poem touches on it a little bit, and this is as close as I'll get to a political poem, probably. This is called America is Bigger, and it's for Steve, my friend who is a hot rodder. America is bigger than bigots and racist, flapping jaws at microphones. This land is deep and clean beneath the scabs of hate. Fear tempts each generation, but true Americans don't succor for blaming Jews or blacks or Latinos. After the local hot rod show, at the downtown car cruise, spectators watch brown-skinned drivers in lowriders. They rise and drop, tilting just so. In the noise and rumble amid neon colors and rapping tailpipes, lowriders fit right in, know exactly what to do to receive applause and hoots of approval. America is a big land. We have a lot of talk in our society now, and I think we have a fixation on money, so this is my answer. This poem is called Being Rich. Being rich is the power to create, to respond to whatever comes shooting down the flume. Oh yes, sometimes what arrives is misfortune, doing your best work in the face of loss and frustration. But among a flock of fools intent on demolition, you follow an inventive course. The artist mind has capacity, a talent for writing, painting, cultivating a garden, or pouring afternoon tea. You memorize a poem or a Bible verse, decorate a clay pot, or dance the tango. You create the best moment of each day and smile because the sun is up once again, marvelous light of life. You sing because a child needs to hear a sweet melody in their nautilus ear. You keep making it up with each step, with each free breath. You even volunteer a laugh to reassure a world on edge, a place often unfair. You create your day and spill bliss and joy into the common trough. This is wealth. My married name is McDowell. My maiden name was McAlpine, and my grandfather is buried in Portland, and on his gravestone it says, born in Scotland. And I was in Scotland here in the last year and bought some books and found out more about what are called the Highland Clearances. And I've written a long piece about it. The first thing I'd like to read is one of the eyewitness accounts of Catherine McPhee of Eelker, South Oost, and that's from the book on the Crofters Trail. She said, I have seen the township swept and the big holdings made of them, the people being driven out of the island. I have seen the stalwarts of the world being bound on Boisdale Quay and cast into ship as would be done to horses and cattle. The agents gave no time for women to gather tweed from looms as crofts were set ablaze. Roof timbers and thatch torched to smoke. Preacher and sheriff countered the afflicted. I say, don't turn away. Catch the ferry, hike the glen, walk a cockle beach, trace the tumbled stone bones where crowded ships set sail, some into rocks, some to new lives. Headlands face misty islands where over again it happened. The eviction of crofters, farm people, reducing by half the native population. Scoured of her people, Gaelic highlands endure, tamed by fence wire for greed, for sheep, for sport by agents and factors, whose black granite hearts burned crofts. Clots of evicted people slept in ditches, beside weary cattle, stumbled to ships, to other lands, grieving their home soil. Struck away by Laird, their blood own, and the English intent on estate expansion, avarice forced babies, the elderly and sick into raw cold. Exhausted Highland people went. A language, the culture, splintered clans, names from antiquity spun off to Australia, Canada, America. Ruined clackons whisper clues. Tilting grave markers hint of run rig history when Scottish crofters ask little, a stone cottage, a wee garden, strip of land, milk, and place of heritage. With flames they were turned out. Clearance, the diaspora of proud people. Dallaville, Morasag, and Shawboost, like pearls from a choker broken, each bead a hamlet lost. Kidnap and force were too common. Signatures agreeing to sail were extorted from the starving for promises of food. Generations seek to know where their folk came from and why they are no longer citizens of their ethnic land. They ask why Scottish islands and fields remain silent and barren. With most tenants banished, 500 landholders now own the big swaths where antlered red deer meld into brown moor. A lyric of home rides pipes and wind. The old place, uncoupled from her people, calls back her scattered own. Off towering Ben Nevis down to coastal Mecca, highlands forever sing a lovely and lonely song. I hope this will resonate with some of you. I suspect it might. It's called Sorting Boxes. This was for me the month of June. This task is best done before dying, sorting and tossing the collections of a house. Sepia-tone photos, clippings, postcards, the scraps passed down from previous generations. I cannot be kind or generous. I must toss. Familiar handwriting, forgotten faces, the humble treasures of poor people. Still, I must toss. Photos circulate to other houses and then are tossed from those houses or add to the load of yet another life in review. Boxes of accumulation offend my eye. I wonder why we collect, pile up marbles and trinkets, reminders of the seashore, recitals, a love affair that stuttered to a stop. There are war letters from a dead father. Airmail from a boyfriend in Vietnam, another off fighting a forest fire. This is my life, the evidence of my up and down roller coaster life. There is no one to pass these photos on to, no one who has interest or time to thumb through albums. I tear out a few photos, add names to the back, and marvel at how cellophane tape dies a dry death. Little black corner tabs hold down photos of my late parents' friends, faces that I never knew. Toss. The camp counselor's letter to my mother, a counselor I detested. Toss. Moments lived bloody and wide, then collapsed into history. Toss. The photo kept to flatter because it really didn't look like me. One last look and toss. This is called The Mistake. Where I went wrong was not collecting 8 letters of reference while seeking the perfect profile. I heard a preacher say this about his search for a job after completing a degree in theology. He said he didn't know 8 people to ask, 8 people who would pen a letter, 8 witnesses to his innocence of any crime. Maybe he knew 6 or 7, but 8 is a mighty big number. The count is always on, prowling to diminish those with low numbers, to award merit badges to high achievers who swim 100 laps or shoot 10 of the terrible enemy flinging themselves over a bloody war hill. In high school, I counted how many boys I kissed, and it meant nothing, was absent a center or happy ending. Kisses are like waffles, sweet and tasty when they are warm, lifeless and limp when cold. Mistakes mound up like manure, stinking up the day, rotting the misbegotten night. Forgiveness is no elixir, not an eraser cleansing a blackboard. Mistakes are life in technicolor. I have even lost count of the tomatoes picked from my garden, the poems that were declared a winner, the ones rejected. Organic life in a muddle suits me, fits my size 5.5 shoe. There they are. And our species seems to be addicted to bloody conflict just about all over the globe. And this is called The East Side of the Cascades. The first phrase comes from Steinbeck's book, Sweet Thursday. The smell of chicken soup is heartbreaking, a clarion for departure, a son going to a combat zone to kill another woman's son, or have his eager limbs lose animation, like killing the ambling mule deer he should be hunting on the east side. Her tears, the salt to season, cut a cruel course toward the pot, where tomorrow simmers. Other weeping women slip in and stand beside her. From antiquity they come, mothers mourning soldier sons, women quarreling with the puffed insanity of war. Her spoon lifts out denuded chicken bones. The broth is ready. I was once a den mother for Cub Scouts. My husband was the pack master. And this is for Martha, wherever you are. I lost track of Martha, and there she is. She likes this poem, so I'm reading it. It's called Window Strike. A junco hits the kitchen window on the day my Cub Scout dies, and is buried without fanfare, without funeral or graveside. Everything cost, and not everyone can pay. This year he turned 50. He had changed, my son said, gone through the ringer of drugs and hard living. On the horns of the buffalo bicycle that he rode with fury, he departs, clawing his way uphill, tearing a mud-red scar in the trail. And in his wake, this wake of unmoving water, I pray for his snarling, loud passage, his honor court before eyes of forgiving blue. The junco revives in the warm hollow of my hand, raises a stunned head and grips my forefinger as life gathers courage to try again. Resurrection is a tricky word, best accomplished in daylight. My sister couldn't come tonight because her grandson's kitchen was flooded by a dishwasher that released water, and she's on every night the family cooks dinner in a different house, so tonight's her night, but this is for my sister. It's called Sweepstakes. We tore entry blanks from magazines found on neighbors' back porches or in the musty hotel lobby. My kid sister and I created jingles, best name ideas, wild guesses, anything to win a new car. We wanted to help our wounded mother. Every day was a spend down after Dad died, leaving Mother with 2 confused little girls. The losses piled up. Income gone and Mother lost into explosive grief and anger. We concentrated on winning a new car. Any car that would operate instead of being another dead body like our stubborn Ford. We were poor in ways it would take an adult lifetime to discover. And I promised a few poems from our last trip to Europe. So this is one called Doing the Odd Thing. The day is blistering hot as we drive between small villages and the French countryside. Charolais cattle are crowded into any spot of shade. We take photos, the standard photos of churches with bell towers, stone walls ablaze with flowers, the rows of Sharon blossoms big as a saucer. Suddenly, the narrow country lane has a traffic jam as we near another village. We park and hike the winding main street where a one-day, once-a-year yard sale is happening. I find a faded watercolor of the local scenery that fits into a suitcase. €3, the village man motions. My husband finds a table of tools and returns with forged pliers, a treasure in a world of instant manufacturing. As I look into the faces of the villagers selling their used wares, I find the real France, painted with smiles above tables of their past life. In the transaction, their history becomes my future. This poem is from Germany. My husband started out life as a forester, so he was interested in seeing the Black Forest. Pedal power. Don't talk to me about e-bikes. None of them accommodated my extremely short legs. Not short for a Scottish Pict, but too short for the e-bike. So I got the kids' bike, and advice to keep my power setting at turbo. 38 kilometers to the Black Forest, along river trails, through suburbs, across asparagus fields, up quaint mountain lanes. I pedaled like the old witch in The Wizard of Oz, fast, leaning over the handlebars that kept sliding downward into their shaft. I pedaled like the fierce pick that I am. I rode to the top of the ruin, to the bistro for a birthday lunch, to the farm for schnapps. The humid heat was awful in the 90s. I was now 72, but I kept pedaling. My husband's parents lived for over 20 years in Montana. He still has a couple of brothers there. We've spent a lot of time there. This is called Something About Montana. You can breathe in the openness of the big sky. Kick back and be whoever you want to be, and nobody cares, because in Montana, there will always be something bigger and badder. Bison wander near Nine Pipe. Grizzlies venture down the Mission Mountains. Ticks suck from bare legs while black widows burrow under old lumber beside the school. Badgers and madmen walk to town. The place hangs on to its edge of wild, but the rich and tame are coming, buying up ranches and building massive log cabins with cracks and air holes in their white chinking. This is for my late mother. Her name was Lillian, and as you might imagine from my attire and poetry, I was not an easy child to parent. This is called The Gypsy and My Mother. Rules and instructions owned the air. We didn't get along. I thought she was thin and narrow. She feared everything about me. Another door opened the day she told me how before I was born, she and her girlfriends used to make the card table dance by laying on their hands while chanting. She believed their magic and told me how they willed the table to lift itself up onto one leg and whirl around beneath the light touch of single fingers, the dark arts spoken of in our Bible house. Her voice held awe and happiness, a tone I had never known. Dad died when I was 4, when her pill-driven screeching grew unbearable and I yearned to take a bus far away. I often thought of my angry mourning mother making a card table dance with her friends. And some of you wanted to hear about the families that I wrote a couple chapbooks about in Southern Oregon and Northern California. Sadly, the last poem I wrote about them is fairly dark, so But it's true, and right now I am a believer in telling the truth. And this is called the devil. His grandmother helped raise him, and she is entitled to say her truth, that she raised a villain, a devil who now torments the rest of her family. I don't know what happened to her love, into what hope chest it has disappeared. He has threatened with weapons, fist, his unhinged mouth, to do harm to his kin. The jail had him for a bit, but let him go. His father fears him and stays away. The devil's own teenage son is tilting toward outlaw genetics. Recently, there was the incident with the gun that his ex-wife's fiancé left in the glove box of his truck, probably for protection from the devil. For no reason known on this side of hell, the fiancé's 16-year-old son shot himself one morning after finding that gun, and the devil was blamed. His reach is insidious and relentless. I have no idea what his grandmother prays for while on her knees. And for my last two poems, a little lighter tone. This is called There Is No Border. Salvation is found outdoors among beavers and ginkgo leaves, loud chickadees, and a million cedars, folding their boughs into trampolines, sending a kid rocketing off toward the moon, where dreams are fashioned with spit and mud. There is no border between nature and a child. Children are nature at its apex, wild and open, their spirit a stallion on the run. Yet unknown to them a day's sorrow and remorse. Yes, sparrows plunge and fall, a mystery why, such random unfolding of a life force. It's easy to forget youthful meditations and drift into adulthood where agendas and clocks demand our all. The pussy willows and pond are waiting, ready with skipping stones and branches drenched in the music of birdsong. Beyond doors and walls, the infinite call of the wild speaks through stars and trees, and breeze blows off the artifice of borders. Last poem. I have a ritual at the end of every summer. On the last day of August, I find a country store. I buy some totally irresponsible treat like an ice cream bar or popsicle, and I sit out front and have a little Thanksgiving for the summer that has just passed. And this was written on one of those adventures in Coos Bay. Bench in afternoon. Outside the ice cream shop, there is a bench where folks suck dry their milkshakes. A cop car cruises down the street. I wave. The cop nods. My feet slide out of flip-flops to rest on warm concrete beneath the bench. That spot is heated by late August sun. This is the last day of the month. School starts in a week. My toes find something to fuss over on the flat surface below the bench. Back and forth the small hard stone goes, beneath the roll of my curious toes. The city cop returns. Neither of us waves. My ice cream is gone. Summer has fled. The stone is actually a cherry pit. I shiver from cold ice cream in my belly. All that is left of summer is one cherry pit. Thank you.